Hello, and welcome to the Innovia Conversation. My name is Steve Waltz.
And I'm Jeff Progulski.
And today's episode is questions about transitioning from NAV to Business Central. And Jeff, we're getting a lot of questions on that, aren't we?
We are, yeah. Everyone I think was excited when Microsoft announced Business Central. There was, excited might be a optimistic way to put it. I think there's probably also some apprehension in the channel, but now that people have seen what is going on, it's sort of what's possible about it, now they're starting to think for our NAV customers, like, how does this affect me and what does this mean going forward?
And so when I think of Business Central and NAV, if I say to you NAV or BC, is it the same thing to you?
Sorry about that. I was trying to stifle my dog from barking. That's what you get when you're a remote user like me, and you get to record.
I thought I stumped you.
You've actually, yeah, you did. So, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question. So you're asking what are they the same thing? Is that the question?
So, when we talk, and I've spoken with a couple of people from Microsoft, and there's almost a pause sometimes. I haven't had that, when somebody looks you in the eye directly and just answers it 100% firmly. I mean, so if I'm a customer, I say, Jeff, is NAV BC, is it the same thing? How would you respond to that?
Let's see. Well, yep, I'm a member of the sales team. So usually I don't put a lot of thought before I say yes. But in this case, I think from a technical perspective, the code base, Business Central, is built on the NAV code that has transitioned over the years from over the last 20 plus years. It is built on that code, so in a lot of ways, you could say yes. Is it identical to NAV? No. So. Not getting into a presidential political definition of the word "the," but a definition of the word of the word "same" would is it identically the same? No. Is it substantially the same? Yes. It's built on the same code base, but there are some differences.
Okay. And maybe we can get into politics later on. I'm sure that'll spark the interest of our listeners.
We will turn off half of. You and I can take opposite sides, so we can turn off 100% of our listeners.
So if we have quite a few of our customers that have their NAV on premise, some older versions, and they're thinking, it's getting close to upgrade time. And I'm thinking about, because they made NAV 2018 was the last NAV version, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And I think the date that of which you were able to still purchase NAV 2018 and not the most current version of the product from Microsoft, which is Dynamics Business Central on-prem, is I think that was April 1st, maybe, was the date that that you could buy the new NAV licensing. So not to confuse our NAV listeners, you can still buy additional NAV licensing for your instance of NAV, going back to whichever version, 2018, 2009, you can still get licensing for that. But if you are looking for a new implementation, you can't buy NAV anymore as of April of this year, I believe.
Okay, because I remember they said at a meeting, I think maybe last year, that you can get the new NAV 18, but that's gone, so the window's closed. And if you're on premise and you wanted the newest version, you will be going to Business Central. That's what it sounds like.
Yep, you are correct.
Okay. So let me say, Jeff, I'm a customer, and I call you. I say, Jeff, we're on NAV 2013 R2. We're thinking about either an upgrade or re-implementation. What are the differences? Is there anything that I need to be aware of that's going to be different going to the new Business Central? Or how do you see that process? Would it have changed if it was a NAV 2019 version? This is where I'm getting at.
Okay, yeah. So there are some changes in terms of what the migration path is, and there are tools that that Microsoft has given us as partners, as well as tools that are available just to end users to help with this transition. When we talk about projects moving to the new version of the software, sometimes we aren't technically specific in our language, and we use the words upgrade. And at times we shouldn't, because we should be using the term re-implement as it relates to moving from a version like Nav 4.0 going to, even if you were going to Nav 2018, you would most likely be re-implementing because of the amount of effort required to manipulate that database from an upgrade perspective. So you would do a re-implementation where you are moving master records over using some of the rapid start tools and the other things that Microsoft gives our delivery team to do these transitions. But we wouldn't just be manipulating the database and getting it to work in a 2018 version. When it comes to Business Central, there are Microsoft has done some cool things to allow us to move it, whether it's into the cloud or into a tenant that is on-prem using the on-prem licensing model. But it is still as of right now, and that's in the world of Dynamics 365, things change rapidly. So a month from now, they might have some super new announcement that changes this. But as of right now, there's no direct upgrade path from any version of Nav to Business Central. There is the ability to I guess I shouldn't say that. Technically, you can go from Nav 2018 through the Intelligent Edge and have your data replicated into a hosted version of Business Central, which is kind of an upgrade. But if you have customizations in your Nav database, those are going to have to be completely retooled to the events and extension model if they're not there right now from a code perspective, so that they operate in Business Central on-prem. So there is.
So let me pause you right there, Jeff, because that brings up a good point, because questions that we get. So if I have Business Central on-premise, or if I'm in the SaaS model, the subscription model, so my modifications that you're saying, it would still be kind of sitting out like an app, like it would be in the SaaS for the on-premise version. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep. That's a good way to put it.
So if they did modifications, like I said, the 2013 R2, and want to come over, really no matter what version before 2018 Nav, they're going to have to kind of go to this model. That's what it sounds like. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, even if their customizations are written in events and extensions, then in theory it could get moved directly into the Business Central code base. But there's probably some developers on our team that might slap me for saying that, because it's never as easy as the sales team makes it sound. But in theory, it should work that way from a 2018 perspective only.
Could you do a quick example? Like, we understand what events and extensions are, but some of our listeners might not. So what do those two things mean?
Let's see. So it actually is, and I am not a developer. So even though I am the tech guy in our sales team, so events and extensions are the new coding method that involves, and it's actually a really important architectural change to the application for people who have been in the Nav space, for 10 plus years on an end user, as an end user. They would, we now sort of shake our heads, because Microsoft would tell us 10 years ago, when the application moved to the role tailored client, everything had to be changed, so you had reports, you had things that pages, and anything that existed in a classic client needed to be completely retooled to get to the role tailored client. But Microsoft said, hey, once you get people to this role tailored client world, it's all the rest of their upgrades are going to be easy and inexpensive. So we told our customers that, we moved people, and then Microsoft said, you know what, we're looking at the application and it's not really designed super efficiently, so we're looking to kind of make it easier to do upgrades, so we're going to change the code base again. And they changed it between 2009 and 2013, and then they made further improvements between 2013 and 2015 and 2016 and 2017. And so what that meant is that none of the upgrades were easy or terribly inexpensive. They got less expensive and easier, but I don't think anyone would call them easy or inexpensive. But so all the Microsoft, sort of under that guideline of making customizations easier to move forward, they got to the point where the current version leverages events and extensions. So rather than actually allowing developers to go into the base code of the ERP system and make changes that need to be completely retooled every time they're moved forward, Microsoft has created the code so that they put events in. And an event is like a maybe it's an on-ramp. If we're thinking about the code as a highway, it's an on-ramp to or an off-ramp to do something else, to do a customization outside of the base code. And what that means is that if the customizations are written in events and extensions, they don't touch the base code at all, so that when Microsoft updates the product, it doesn't change anything, and the events and extensions hang outside the base code. So then if those need to be retooled at all, which they shouldn't have to if they're written properly, but they get retooled outside the ERP, so Microsoft can go to the next version of BC on-prem, and all of these events and extension type customizations will just, all you have to do is move them to the new event and the new code, and everything just works. So it's sort of, I think the language that I've heard is extracting the customization layer from the base ERP, so that going forward, it's a lot easier, and you don't have to retool every time you move to a different version.
Well, I think that's getting closer to the Microsoft message, as we were told several years back that, once you kind of get to the newer version, it should be more of a oil change versus an engine change. And this seems like a really positive step towards that. So let's say I invest in doing this. I go to Business Central on-premise, and then 3 years down the road, I decide to upgrade. So those apps that are sitting out there that create how we're communicating back and forth with these events and extensions. So is that going to be a lot less, Jeff, compared to doing an upgrade today?
Yeah. So, and I think that, the opinion on is this better or not is you'd get differing opinions if you were an ISV compared to an end user. And even maybe a partner like us, we would have I think ultimately for the end users, it's great. And it really means that it's going to be, we're going to have easy, inexpensive upgrades. And you can look at it from the standpoint of people that are on the SaaS version, the Microsoft Cloud version of Business Central. They're rolling out updates, semi-annually at least, and those updates just happen. And although we've had a few small hiccups with some of the updates from Microsoft, where some reports needed to be reconnected or refreshed, some really minor issues, they're able to upgrade the entire their entire customer base running the Business Central Cloud version without anyone doing anything to the code. So ultimately that will be, I think that's a good thing. And going forward, it's not going, it's going to mean that we don't have to touch these things because they're plugged into to an event, and that event, as long as it exists in the new code base, which of course it would, there's nothing you have to do to it. All the stuff that you're doing, the app that's doing, that exists outside of the base code is all it needs to do is be brought forward. There's no customizations, there's no tweaking, there's nothing. So it is really going to be great for the end user. For ISVs, that means that they had to completely retool their code, so their apps would work with the hosted version, and then sort of, I guess, a point of clarification for ISVs. The ISV world in the Business Central cloud model is a subscription-based, month to month, just like your Business Central subscription with Microsoft. So that, you're subscribing to that, you're plugging it in, you're essentially just plugging a code in for most of these ISVs in the cloud version of Business Central. When it comes to the on-premise version, it's not quite as simple. So I think ISVs have been challenged with sort of this dichotomy of having code that runs in the Business Central cloud as well as code that works in the Business Central on-prem world. And even though those code bases are the same, the delivery method and the licensing model and all of that has changed. And I think licensing, I don't know what you hear, Steve, but I hear a lot of questions about licensing as it relates to transitioning from Nav and going to Business Central. And do you get that a lot too?
I do, but before we get to that, I think you hit a good point, because Microsoft is a behemoth. It is a huge company that has endless resources, and when going to this new software, you have all these add-ons, and a question that I get asked, I know you get asked, and that's one of the beauties of having an account manager here at Innovia, is we kind of pay attention to who's ready and who's not, because there's some ISVs that really have maybe 3 or 4 people, Jeff, and they have they've been kind of in the channel for a while with a standard product and kind of tweak it here and tweak it there for the new versions. But now it's like, here you go, here's a whole new language. Oh, it's a little different on premise than it is in the cloud, and we're going to be ready next month. Are you ready? And it's we can laugh about it, but this whole channel, and I remember speaking with somebody when I was at a meeting in Denver about that. I'm like, how many ISVs can keep pace with Microsoft? And we're kind of finding that out right now, aren't we?
We are, yep. We're, and I think it's a as we enter into discovery phases for future projects with our end users, it's like we really have to pay much closer attention to the ISV space to understand does this ISV have a version that is ready for BC on-prem? I'd say all of them went to certainly focus on the hosted Microsoft Cloud version of Business Central, but not all of them are ready for the BC on-prem version. So it's even more important as you're considering a project that you identify the ISVs that are critical. And one of the things that we find in some cases, Microsoft's constantly adding functionality to the system. So sometimes that is putting certain ERPs out of business because their functionality has been rolled up into the version of the latest version. That's something to consider, that you might not need as many ISVs going forward, but in a lot of cases, the ISVs are filling critical holes in the application as it results to very specific industries. So it's I guess our new reality that we just have to pay attention to.
And we do. And if you're not one of our customers and you're thinking about this, those are questions you want to ask. One of the things that I've noticed when I go to AppSource is that, so let's say you were thinking about it, or you have some sort of add-on that you weren't using previously with Microsoft. Now, if you're thinking about it, maybe they were looking at the roadmap a couple years ago going, let's just wait till the new version comes out. So it seems like at AppSource, there's add-ons I've never heard of before that are new to the market. So make sure you do your due diligence. It's exciting because there's probably some great solutions out there that we never really had or worked with in the past on Nav, but now they're kind of prepared, and I don't know if they have a leg up on some of the older ISVs, but it'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds. So, but you had the question about licensing, and easy to talk about. It always goes smoothly. And speaking with our owner and founder Donovan, thank goodness he's a licensing expert, and you're a licensing expert, and we have one of the things when I came over to this world about 4 years ago, I had no idea, because all you need is one license to expire on ISV or on Nav, or you're transitioning to something else. But so the questions that are coming up that we're hearing a lot, Jeff, and you can add to these, but what I'm hearing is, okay, I have concurrent users now, and I'm running maybe 2 or 3 shifts on it. And then when you look at the new model of Business Central, I know in the SaaS they are named users, and it looks like they are named users even on premise. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. And I think eventually, even people that aren't running, BC on-prem, there's going to be some sort of a day of reckoning where Microsoft is going to move everyone to a named user business model. That's where the software world is going. Microsoft is essentially just trying to keep pace with the rest of the market in that. But yes, there will be the Business Central on-prem is licensed in a named user situation.
So if I know everybody hopefully is current on their maintenance, right? You buy the software, you pay the amount of money it costs to buy it, and then it's normally around 16% with Mr. Softy that they want their money. And then if you're current with that, then you have access to the new software. But now with this new named user, if you had concurrent licenses, the ratio can change. And I remember we had a customer that actually was looking at not just 2 people using licenses, but 3. And I know Donovan went to bat for that, but I think maybe you can talk a little bit more on if I have, let's just assume I am a current Nav user and I want to go to Business Central on premise, how would that work?
Yeah, so that would, in terms of from a licensing perspective, anything that you have, any users you have, and I believe the date was as of May 1st, so that any Nav users, and I think actually it works with GP users and AX as well, but any Nav users that you have prior to May 1st, transitioning to, in a concurrent license model, transitioning to Business Central on-prem would give you now, it started as a 2-for-1 named user instance, but it's now going to 3-for-1. So if you had 10 concurrent users, you'll be entitled to 30 named users. It is important to understand that there are ways to kind of get around that named user with using some generic user accounts, like Paint Booth 1 or Assembler 1 for that assembly station, and you may have 3 different people logging into that machine. So that that in the past has been ways, depending on how in the named user licensing world, that matters, because especially as this Business Central application is tied into other applications like Microsoft Flow and Power BI and even your Outlook, odds are you're not going to have an Office 365 user named Paint Booth 1. I mean, individuals are going to have their email, and if any of this stuff is the ultimate experience of collaboration and productivity happens when each user has access to the other Microsoft applications ultimately, so all of these things can work together. And if you start using generic accounts, it sort of defeats the purpose of some of the other functionality of the ERP. So I think that's Microsoft struck a fair deal going for 3-to-1, because even in the case of, a 24-hour production facility that has 3 shifts of people that all might be signing into the same machine, and in the concurrent licensing model only consumed 1 NAV license, now getting 3 named users for that should cover those scenarios. And then certainly, office staff, et cetera, where you might have some people that fill in different roles, but typically front office staff is only working a single shift. So I think we're covered in that method by the named user, but there were some nervous moments there for people who run 3 shifts and have a big production floor and a lot of users. They're like, how are we going to afford it? How many more NAV users or BC on-prem users are we going to have to buy in this new model? And fortunately, I think the answer is very few. We haven't even in the transition projects that we've done now to move people to BC on-prem. We haven't had to haven't had any users have to buy a lot of licenses to in this new licensing model, and that might be a good. Another, from a transition perspective, the licensing doesn't. The license, your NAV license, you're current on your NAV, so you're just going to, get transitioned to the BC license. You're not purchasing anything, but I think it's helpful for people who are maybe considering moving to BC on-prem to understand that from a cost perspective. If you remember it, the old licensing model in the concurrent had, you had to buy the starter pack and the extended pack for $5,000 and $10,000, and then that came bundled with 3 users, and then additional users were $3,000 a piece. So if you were gonna buy new NAV licensing for a 10-user environment, you were looking at let's see, if 15,000, and that included the first 3 users. So then you had 7 more users at 3,000 a piece. So that's 21. So that's like $36,000 of licensing, and that gave you, what would be the equivalent. The extended pack gave you the equivalent of premium Business Central functionality. Now, if you want to get 10 users on Business Central Premium on-prem, they are just $2,800 a piece. There's no more base licensing. Now those are, named users, not concurrent, but you'd buy, those 10 users, that's $2,800 a piece. So that's $28,000. So technically it's about 10% less in the example that I gave for buying the same amount of software. So that's interesting from the perspective of just about everything else is going up. In this case, with the license transition, it's actually a little bit less expensive.
Right. So if you're buying 3 of them, you would pay under $9,000 for the premium versus paying $15,000. So that's a big savings right there, right? And it kind of averages out as you add users on that. And so just to help people understand, because you had this, what you said, the starter pack and the extended pack, Microsoft calls Dynamics 365 Business Central. There's 2 versions, the Essentials and then the Premium. So would it be safe to say the Essentials is like the starter pack and the Premium is like the extended pack, Jeff?
Yep, exactly. It's not in terms of the difference. What you get in Business Central Premium that isn't included in Essentials is the full manufacturing functionality as well as service management, and that's that would equate roughly to the old model with Essential or the starter pack and the extended pack.
Well, great. I know there's and we have the pricing available, and actually you can go on the website and see the SaaS version. So the Business Central Essentials is $70 per user per month, named user, and then as Jeff said, if you wanted to get the manufacturing and the service added to it, it would be a premium, which is $100 per month per user. So it seems, Jeff, that we're seeing more smaller businesses looking at getting into the ERP world. It's, I call them the tweeners. They were, maybe not big enough to really afford a full ERP implementation, but they needed one. And so it seems like this is a way that Microsoft has kind of leveled the playing field for them, to where the entry in is not as much capital up front. But let's say you had 10 users, so you're spending, let's say you did manufacturing, so that's $1,000 a month, so it's $12,000 a year. And from what you said, is that they update the SaaS version, correct?
Yep. It's all done by Microsoft.
And so there's no annual maintenance with the SaaS version. And really the upgrades have kind of gone away, correct?
Yep, exactly. Right.
So I guess if you're thinking of looking at it, if you're either new, and something we do here at Innovia, we'd have more of an ROI discussion with you. If you are currently using Nav or a Business Central, if you decide to go to the subscription model, there are some incentives from Microsoft, because you already spent some money with them, to actually get that down for a little bit for a period of time. And I think, Jeff, I don't know if we want to discuss that or talk about that on another podcast. What do you think?
Yeah, that's. I think that would be a great topic for, because we could really dig in pretty deep to that, and
Right.
And I think we've had I think Tom's done some good presentations on there, but yeah, that's a great topic for future.
And you're right. So actually, so our CMO, our Chief Marketing Officer, Tom Dorn, and Donovan Lane, our founder, did a webinar a couple months ago. So if you go to our website at Innovia.com, you can click on events, and on past events, you can actually register and watch that. And they did a great job going over it. So Jeff, once again, I think you did an awesome job going over this, and appreciate it.
Sure. Hey, one thing that I did want to point out.
I almost got it.
We're going to go on for at least 23 more minutes.
That's right.
Let me tell you a story about when I went hiking in Kentucky. No, it's
okay.
It's not going to be. The one thing that I wanted to point out in terms of just the functional difference between it's not significant, because as we said at the beginning, Business Central on-prem is built on the code base of Business Central Cloud, but there are just a few features that don't work out of the box, and with Business Central on-prem, and depending on the importance, and I've had some discussions with customers about how these things work. One of the biggies is the default Power BI reports that exist in the cloud version of Business Central it's not supported as of this current version of BC on-prem. So default Power BI reports and the automatic deployment and configuration isn't supported. So that's a big thing. If you're using not so big, the bookings app in the Office Business Premium integration, there's you can schedule some things, and you can do invoicing from the bookings app, which is a Office 365 app. That's not supported in the BC on-prem. And Microsoft Flow doesn't integrate with the on-premise workflow functionality. So if you start to leverage Microsoft Flow in a way that would tie into the workflows of Business Central, and if you heard the word flow too many times in that line, that's probably also a topic we could discuss in another podcast. But it's important. So basically, what you're starting to learn is that like a lot of the other Office 365 tie-ins don't natively work with BC on-prem, and one of the reasons for that is because they require they rely on Azure Active Directory integration, which is built in when the application, the BC application, exists on Microsoft's cloud when it's on your own servers. In a BC on-prem instance, it obviously that Azure Active Directory integration isn't there. You need to whitelist the applications in Azure for them to tie in, and so like things like the late payment prediction functionality also isn't supported. One of the reasons for that is because it relies on Cortana Intelligence, and that needs to be that's done through Azure as well. So those were the things that I just wanted to to get out there. So that would probably be the only difference. And so without getting technical into talking about Active Directory and stuff, it's basically the all of the Office 365 business application tie-ins to Business Central don't work quite as well in the on-premise version. So if you're thinking about leveraging those and that's a reason for you to upgrade, it's important for you to analyze that before moving forward with a BC on-prem project so you understand how that's different. In the cloud version, all of that stuff works. It's remarkable. It's super easy. It's all, the benefit of being on the Microsoft cloud, but you're sacrificing that in the on-premise version. So, all right, I'm done now, Steve.
Well, it's important stuff, Jeff. And so are you going to any upcoming user group meetings?
Let's see. I actually don't think it appears that the user groups, at least the Wisconsin one that I attend most regularly, I think we're off until September.
Okay.
What about you?
So we have a couple. We have Bob Baird is one of our members of our customer engagement team. He'll actually be presenting at the Denver meeting coming up in August. We'll be attending Minnesota and Houston in August, and then also Seattle. I'll be presenting in Seattle meeting. I think it's August 22nd coming up. They're getting ready to launch the date here. So if you're attending those meetings, please seek out the person wearing the Innovia shirt. We're excited to be an annual sponsor for our friends at NABUG BC. And I think that's about it for upcoming conferences. So, Jeff, I know when I said about the website, if you go to the Innovia.com website under resources, and Tim, our marketing guru, has done a great job. He actually, there's our upcoming webinars, our webinar library. Our podcast is on there, even talks about our conferences, and then there's even a link to the Dynamics community. If you're not a member of NABUG, then there's a link for you to join that, and that's another conversation. But please take a look at that. The Innovia podcast are available on Apple, which I use for my podcast, and it'll be downloaded. So when my wife and I fly here shortly, she'll be able to listen to our podcast. So
you're not that cruel a husband, are you? Forcing her to listen. Come on, download it. We need our numbers up. I use Stitcher. It's available on Stitcher as well. Google Play. Yep, we're everywhere, man. YouTube,
Google
I think.
Play Music, and what's TuneIn? I never heard of that one.
Yeah, I think that is another podcast app like Stitcher.
Great. So we're available there, and you can follow us on Twitter, Innovia Consulting, and we're also on Facebook. So we appreciate, once again, everybody listening. And Jeff, do you have anything you want to add, or do I ask that?
Yeah, you're going to learn by this podcast, like number 12 or 13, something like. You're going to learn by about like 25 not to ask. I did want to say that the Microsoft Inspire.
That's right.
Used to be the Worldwide Partner Conference, but sometimes there's some exciting news that's not dynamic centric from Microsoft's world, but sometimes they've got some exciting Azure announcements. So we've got our CEO and COO, right? Both past guests of the Innovia Conversation podcast, Alan Wine and Chad Williams, that will be heading to Las Vegas, I think this weekend for that conference. So we might we certainly will be talking, at least mentioning what information they brought back from that event on our next podcast.
So Jeff went last year. And when he came back, he was so excited and told him about it. They're like, "Okay, Jeff, you're staying."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I am disappointed. I was getting the reminder messages. I'm like I met a good friend from the Netherlands that runs a Skype for Business practice over there. That that we buddied up and actually it was great. So he was messaging me on Facebook saying, "Hey, are you coming?" And I'm like, did not make the cut this year, but I'm going to lobby for next year. So it's a great conference and a lot of good information. It probably didn't help that I, almost physically assaulted Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella last year. It probably had something to do with.
That's right. Yeah. So, Jeff decided to track him down. And, oh, by the way, here's my daughter's card or resume. You're looking for somebody.
Hey,
thank you, sir. I never get these handed to me.
He's a UW Milwaukee Panther alumni. We have to.
That's an in right there, Jeff. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. So
good
deal. All right. Well, I will stop talking now.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you on our next episode. Have a good day.
Thanks, sir.